Okay, so there's a lot of you here. Yeah, so the rest of my blogs have all been based on how a school is based on that of a factory. So this one's not going to be any different really, but it's actually looking at the layout of a school. I know this was the same at my school, but I'd never put it to the same as a factory. So if you go on to the next slide. So yeah, in a factory there's separate blocks. So in block A you construct one part of it, and then part B you construct the next part of it, and then C, then D. And it's the same in school. Each subject is split into a different block. So why is it set up like that? Why do we go from block A to block B for a different subject? So go on to the next slide. I found this when I was doing my blog. Don't know if it was procrastination or what, but I found it really interesting. And it's actually an example of a factory that makes cakes. I got really distracted because then I really wanted cake, or I wanted to make cake, and then looking at the timescale, I didn't know how they made the cake that quick. But if you look, you go from A to B to C to D. So you make the cake, then what does it say? Yeah, you make the cake, then you cook it, then you decorate it. But it's basically the same as what a school is. So you go to one block and you do one subject, and then you go to the next block and you do the next subject. And it's the same. So if you go on to the next one. So I actually looked at the benefits of a factory. Why is it set up in this way? So it's very low cost because everything is very controlled. You know where power is going to each area. You know where all the workers are, and you can cut down on workers. If you know in one area you only need 3 people to be able to construct 100 cakes just to make it. In the cooking part, you're not going to need very many people because they physically can't cook a cake themselves. And then decorating, you'll probably need a lot more people because how intricate it is. So the next one. This is actually my high school. I tried to find a floor plan because I know myself there was A block was science, B block was also science, C and D was English, E was French, and then it carried on all the way up. So each block, some had 2 blocks because of the size of the subject, but there was different blocks. So these are just some pictures of the different areas. So you've got art block, ICT block, and I actually found I'd never correlated the two in my head. I just thought, oh, it's organised in that way because it's quite easy. But looking at the benefits of it, it's very low cost. You only got the lights on in certain blocks. It's very easy to control. So you know where all the pupils are. They're going from one block to the next block. Usually one-way systems as well inside. So it's very easy to supervise. But I'd never correlated the two. But what does it do to our learning? Okay, next. So I actually looked at it in terms of what we learn in one classroom, because a lot of the blocks are the same. I know myself in a maths block, because that's where I spent the majority of my time being a bit of a geek. All the classes looked the same. You all faced the same way. All the academic posters were the same around the room. So you're learning within one context, and it's like research suggests that if you learn something in one context, so in one room, you're more likely to be able to recall this information in the same context. So you go into one room, you learn the information, you go into another room in the same block that looks pretty much exactly the same, you'll be able to recall the information better than if you was in a big hall. So it's suggesting that this context-dependent learning actually aids our recall and how much we can learn. Piece of research that says if you learn a list of words underwater, I don't know why you'd learn words underwater, but that's what Stu did. They recalled the words when they were underwater in compared to being on land. And it was exactly the same with the participants that learned the words on land. Okay. So yeah, as I said about it being in schools, you learn in an environment that is the same the whole way through. So I know myself, every maths room at Chase where I went to school, they all looked the same. Very boring, very dull, didn't really enjoy it. But I could recall that information in the same environment. And yeah, going from when you go into a maths block, you know, right, I'm going to be doing maths, I know I'm going to be learning this, I'm going to be learning this. So it focuses the mind and the attention of the students. Yeah, so you can link the subject to the block that you're in. So you can look around the room, there's maths posted, it's still focusing your attention into that subject. Okay. So in comparison to that, there's context-independent learning. which it says that you can understand the core meanings of what you're learning, but you can then take that meaning away from where you've learnt it, so it's independent of the context. So you can take that into a different place and still recall the information. Whereas this is just a quote, source of semantic encoding variability. So it's not, it's completely dependent on the context with context-dependent learning, whereas your context-independent can be taken away and used elsewhere. So I looked at this in school. It's what is learned in the classroom is context-dependent, but is what is needed outside of the classroom is context-independent. So the things that we're learning in school, so Pythagoras theorem, haven't used that since I left the maths classroom. No idea what I could apply that to. But if we actually taught the actual mathematical skills rather than the content, it can be taken away and we can use that elsewhere. So it's not applicable to real world. Yeah, within a factory, you work to a set. You're making products, and you work to a set standard. So it's got to be this shape, this size, and whatever. And it's only built for one purpose. When that product's been taken out of the factory, once it's been produced, it is only used for one purpose. No one actually questions the use of it. Granted, I know you can use, if you haven't got a doorstop, like an actual doorstop, most other people just chuck something else in front of the door. So it's not always used like that, but you don't really question the purpose of a product that's been produced. The workers just work towards this set aim. They don't take those skills out of the factory. So, and then in schools, go on to the next one. In school, we are taught to pass an exam. So we reach a set standard, so they want all GCSE pupils to get A star to C grade. So that is our set aim, that's what society wants us to reach. So the information that we learn to pass the exam, we aren't taught the skills to then take out of that context and into the real world. Okay. So we're still in this factory mentality that there is one product to produce and there's one way to do it. And it's the same in a school. We want this exam result, but they're not telling us how to use that, like the skills and the things we've learnt to pass the exam, to use it in any other situation. So why aren't we taking information that's context independent rather than context dependent? So yeah, we're still thinking in that box. We need to think outside of the box rather than doing things the way that it always is. Okay. Any questions? No? Not even a question from Jess? Yeah.
You talked about how the school is set up like in a particular way, and we all know everybody's got a schema of what a school is, and I think you can go in any school and say, yep, this is a school. Is the environment within the school, or the physical environment within the school, optimized for learning?
I think the only way it optimises learning is that it's very controlled. You know where you are, you know what you're doing, and it's very looking at classroom management. So because it's so easily controllable, it's like that's how people are then learning, because it's very strict and regimented. Whereas that, to me, is sitting there and listening to someone. You're not able to go out and find. You're not. It's kind of like putting a border to learning. So you learn it in this room, whereas it's not suggesting that you can learn stuff elsewhere.
So I think one of the take-home messages that I've got this year that I have not had in years past, and I appreciate the fact that we have so much psychology put into this whole thing, is that education, the education system we have now, is primarily about management and administration. Because talk after talk, blog after blog after blog, the bottom line is we do this way because it's easiest to manage.
Yeah.
Where's the learning?
Well, that's what I was touching on in this. It's easy to manage. It's set up in that way, so the teachers find it easier, but it doesn't mean it's maximising the amount that you learn.
But even when we talk about all the other topics that have been covered this semester, where's the learning? It's a miracle. I actually really love Einstein's quote now. You know, the biggest thing that gets in the way of my learning is school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I just ask, did you take your exams in the same rooms as you learned?
Some of them, yeah. Otherwise, because with smaller subjects, so especially at A level, we was put into a smaller room that looked more like a classroom, whereas at GCSE, yeah, we was in a bigger hall. But we was actually taught different management, like different revision skills of imagine yourself when you're revising in that in the where we did our exams. So they even taught us, imagine you're in that context, learn. Yeah. So they were
Setting you up.
Yeah. So that basically they moved us into a different classroom, but they actually taught us the methods to be able to think that we were learning in that context. So they were still using that context-dependent learning. So, yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.